G'day YouTube. We're here on episode 4 of the Harley adventure build. Today we're going to be taking the Sportster, fitting a bag rack onto the back of the tracker tail. We're going to be extending the side stand, and then if we get time, I'm going to run through the front fender. We're making that out of aluminium, so I've patterned the paper for it already. We're going to cut that out, see if we can shape it up and fit it on the front of the bike. So I've finished making up this sort of exoskeleton over the back of the tracker tail. This is going to be something that's a little bit more permanent on the bike. Although it is easily removable, I want it to sort of look good while I'm riding around town. The sissy bar part though is going to be removed and only used when I'm sort of packing heavy with bags. So this stuff's made out of an 8mm stainless steel solid bar that I've just bent and shaped by hand. It's hard to do that sort of stuff bending over dies, so I prefer to just throw it in a vise, bend and shape it, whether it be with heat or cold bending. And then I've welded some threads onto the top of it here that will locate and mount my sissy bar rack. I've tacked this back part up and I'm just about to go through and start to make the bracing to give it a bit more strength. So I just finished up putting the final welds on the sissy bar here. It's a bit of an odd thing seeing a scrambler with a sissy bar, but a bit of a necessary evil for the trip that we're doing. I don't really want too much hanging off the sides of the bike. I'd prefer to sort of have it in the center. So I'm going to finish this up now and move on to making the aluminium front fender off the bottom triple clamp. So when I was getting ideas together for this bike, I sort of had in my mind, well, apart from this wild sort of lighting setup with the lights in the fork guards, I wanted a two-stepped sort of fender. So I've already built the one on the back here that'll stop a lot of shit flicking up into the engine, but I wanted something sort of high and really dirt bike looking. I've templated this bit of cardboard here and I've just transferred that onto a sheet of aluminium. So all that's left to do is sort of cut that out and bend it up. I've never really made anything like this before, so it might take me a little while, but I think if I can get it right, it'll be something that's pretty standout on this bike. So I've transferred my paper template onto this aluminium. I've got to make a few more cuts, but I'm thinking I might try and bend it on my finger brake. It's a new addition to the shop. I got given it by a mate, so I might chuck it on there and see if we can make this work with it. So I've just finished bending my rough outlines for this front fender. It's going to be a two-piece which I'll weld together. So I've put my folds on the side and then put the angles on it. So this one will bolt up underneath my triple clamp. And then this front piece here, I've got to section out a small piece here so it sits a bit more level, but that will be welded up under there to give it a bit of a flare out on the nose. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out now and get this to mate up properly, and then I'll start to tack weld it up and then finish welding it together. So just finished mounting up the alley front fender that I fabricated. Super stoked with how it came out. It gives it a real dirt bike feel. So I'm really happy that I could sort of take something that I'd been thinking about for a while, plan it out, put it into action. It turns out looking so good. From here, I'm going to extend the stand quickly. That won't be worthwhile watching, but soon enough, we're going to move on to fabricating the exhaust and finishing up the rest of the fabrication before we tear this thing down for paint. Alright, so we've finished welding up the 2 header pipes, and I've started to put the V-band connectors on here. I got some V-band joints from the guys at Ben Brothers just because I like the gnarly look of them. I don't often see them on bikes, so I'm going to put these on and then start to make the 2-into-1 collector. Once we get to that stage though, I'm going to have to stop on the exhaust before I actually make the muffler for the rear of it. Need a few parts and stuff like that, so that'll happen at a later stage. So with this 2-into-1 collector, obviously nothing comes off the shelf here, so it had to be handmade. What I tend to do is I have my 2 inch and 3/4 header pipes, and then I've taken a 2.5 inch pipe, put it in the vise and squeeze that down so it's the same width as that, and then it also sort of elongates a bit as well. So that gives you a measurement that you need to bring your 2 header pipes into a collector. So that's a matter of setting a sort of a V up and trimming off on the inside so they both merge into one, tacking that up, and then it's a lot of like back and forth to measure, cut, make sure it fits properly. And now I've tacked it up, put a bit of heat on it here to punch in so we can get a nice weld around there, sort of shaping it into the contours of the 2-into-1 collector. Now it's tacked up, I'll give it a final clean, set my purge up on it, and then I'll weld it to finish. Got my purge set up finished now, so a plumbing test plug in the end. These are pretty readily accessible and cheap to get. A little hose connected to my regulator, and then blocked off on the end by some heat-proof tape. Run a little bit of pressure of my argon gas through here to stop the welds from sugaring on the backside and give me the best opportunity to make like a nice strong weld on the front here. So I'm going to crank that gas up now, finish welding this, we'll slap it on the bike. So I just finished welding up this 2-into-1 collector here. Pretty happy with how it comes out, but as stainless does, it's pulled a bit while I was welding it. So this V-band joint isn't sort of mating up as it should. What I've had to do is cut the tacks off this side, and then I'll put this V-band on, pull it tight so it'll meet it up nicely, and then I'll take it off, make sure it's all perfect, and then I'll re-tack this before I finish welding it. So now I'm finished with the exhaust, I'm going to move on to the intake. So an idea that I've sort of been alluding to for a while in this series, and sort of posting little teasers on my Instagram, has been an airbox for the Sportster. So when I was looking at a bike to do this with, practicality wasn't a huge thing for the donor bike, but I wanted to have something that I could be able to create something that was ultimately practical for adventure. So one of the things that stuck out on the Sporty to me was the air filter just hanging straight out the side. I've been to off-road riding events and hooligan events and stuff like that, and the boys had always had dramas with their air filters just stuck right out in the breeze, catching as much dirt as they could. I threw around the idea for a little while, and what I came up with was relocating the coil on the front of the bike and then building an airbox that I can link up from the Electron carburetor into the front of the motor here. So this airbox is going to accept a DNA air filter. I contacted the guys there. Marios has become a mate of mine, and they were stoked on the idea, always, you know, willing to help out with something a little bit different. So they've made me this special cylinder pod filter that will slot inside the airbox. I've got some clear Perspex caps that I made up yesterday, and then this will fit on top of the motor here, tucked in behind the headlight plate, out of the weather, and sort of out of the way for most things that would, you know, normally come into contact with the air filter hanging out the side. So I'm going to finish welding that aluminium box up and then start the process of fitting my Perspex caps into the side of this thing so we can start creating the airbox, mount it up, and then eventually link it in with our Electron carburetor. So eventually I'll drill some drain holes in the bottom here in case any water or dirt sort of gets in. But I wanted to shape this out of aluminium so I could firstly weld my mounts on, and then secondly, if I needed to change something on the fly, I can always cut and weld this later. I'm not really sure if that's the best way to do it, but you know, this is all part of the process of developing something. So if you have a better idea, let me know. So now I'm going to weld this seam up along the bottom here, finish that back, and I'll work on putting the end caps in so we can fit the filter. So I just finished mounting my aluminium airbox up onto the Sporty here, welded some tabs on to link it into the frame and used the old coil mount holes to bolt it on. I'm going to leave that as it is now. I'll come to finish it up later once it's sort of time for tear down and paint, but I've just chucked the K-Tech rear shocks on for my final length. I've got a 410mm K-Tech shock from Joe at Ride Dynamics. So now that that's on, I've also got a K-Tech steering damper that's going to go on the front. I need to figure out where I'm going to link that between the fork and the frame, put the brace on, and then weld a mount on as well. So I know this thing's not going to be incredible for high horsepower, but I'm hoping that the sort of benefits that it gives me with keeping my air filter clean going off-road will negate that a little bit. So as with all things when developing different things that, you know, I've never done before, I'm not an expert at any of this, it's just about having a go, seeing what happens, and then trying to iterate from there. So I might have to change the way this is set up or something, but I'm going to give it a crack, see how it goes. So don't jump down my throat in the comments and tell me that I'm an idiot. I know, but I'm willing to try anyway. Another thing that I've been working on here is a little dynamic chain tensioner. You see these sort of around, you can buy them as a product for a few different bikes, but I couldn't really find one for a Sporty, not that I liked anyway. So I borrowed a skateboard wheel off my mate Jake, a couple of compression springs, and then fabricated the rest on the lathe with a few bearings on the pivot point. This sort of thing, with the amount of lift that I've put on the suspension, like the 14-inch shocks, and then the track dynamic swing arm, which lifts your rear end anyway, I thought it was sort of necessary. The chain line was quite slack on the bottom, so this, as the suspension travels, will keep my chain at a decent tension through a lot more of the travel range than it would have normally. So with that set, I'm going to leave that for now. I do have to put a little bit more bracing on it on this end so that the skateboard wheel is sort of supported from both sides, but that's sort of something that will take me 5 minutes to do later. I'm going to start doing a bit of work on the exhaust now. I've got the headers done. I'm just going to fabricate a muffler, which is going to be a huge task. I've never really done it before, but something that hopefully will be a pretty cool, unique piece on this bike. But when you do this sort of stuff for the first time, it's always something that takes forever to do. So I've started to build out the outside casing for this Sportster muffler that will rise up and cover the rear shock on the right hand side of the bike. So I've taken some 2-inch pipe and some 1.5 inch, and I'm going to sort of make that into a weird sort of oval shape, and then I'll build out a perforated muffler core that will slip into the 2-into-1 section. This will all sort of come off from the 2 header pipes at the V-band joint that we've put in, so that'll all sort of be one piece. With this sort of stuff, it is going to take me ages, so I'll just chuck this on time lapse and you'll sort of see a bit of it going together. That'll wrap it up for episode 4 on the Adventure Sportster build. Coming up next, we'll be putting everything back together after powder coat and then starting to run you through how I go about putting the electrics back on these bikes, fitting in the old loom with the new custom wiring that we'll use. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next ep.